In today's video, I'm in London for the weekend, and I'll be taking you on a photo walk through the city, trying to find little stories and capture meaningful moments along the way. I'll be talking you through my images as we go, as well as giving a few of my thoughts and ideas about the importance of story in street photography. Straight after leaving my hotel, I noticed this guy dressed as a town crier eating breakfast in a subway, which isn't something you see every day. So straight away, a bit of an idea for a story-driven image. Anything unusual can often make a strong image full of story, so as he seemed to be walking in the direction of the tube station I was going to anyway, I decided to see if I could get a better photo along the walk. I was a bit slow on the uptake here, but he was asking these folks for directions, which I thought in the moment might make for a funny photo. Shouldn't it be the town crier giving out directions, not asking for them? Well, in this case it was the other way around, so I snapped off a couple of shots, which I'm quite happy with. I usually need a while to warm up when I hit the streets, but this was a gift right at the start of the photo walk. A lot of the story-driven moments happen so fast on the street, you just need to be ready and have your eye locked in to not only notice them, but to try and capture them too. Finding an unusual scene and then showing it out of context can also make for a good story. While we can't create stories as street photographers, we can try and find them, or at least find and capture a scene that someone might project their own story onto, which can make for powerful images, and that's something I've become increasingly interested in exploring in my own work recently. I headed into Central with a plan to get into Chinatown for the start of the Spring Festival or Chinese New Year celebrations, but first, true to form, it started raining. I'd left my umbrella in the hotel, thanks reliable English weather forecasting, and I didn't have a coat, so I holed up with a bunch of other people under the arches opposite Piccadilly Circus. When something happens like a rain shower, this gives a great chance for story-driven images, because it can cause people to react or congregate in an area, leading to good photo opportunities. In the space of about 10 minutes or so here, I just enjoyed watching people hide from the rain. When I'm looking for stories, I'm also thinking about the possibility of capturing multiple images that, when you see them in sequence, can add to the story of the images together. I really like spontaneous moments that a viewer can relate to. For example, this mum pulling her kid up off the floor as they fell over. We can all relate to that because we've all been kids at one point in time, so that kind of subject matter can make for strong photos in my opinion. I also try and keep my eyes peeled for people making gestures, as that can often be something we read a story into. So here, for example, it was great timing to be able to capture this lady in a nice, interesting coat, and also a child putting his hand out in a similar fashion, testing to see if it's still raining. Story-driven images are really hard to make, as you generally need to be out in the street time after time, day after day, to be able to capture moments with meaning or notice them. Sometimes you go out and nothing happens. In fact, most of the time you go out and nothing happens. Every time I go on a photo walk though, I see it as a chance to practice. So even if I don't see anything incredible, I still take a lot of photos to try different compositions and be ready for when the real moments come along. Having a list of triggers or things that pique your attention when you're out can really help you capture story-driven photos and give you an idea of what to look for. For example, people wearing the same clothes, that's something that can easily be noticeable and might make for an interesting story-type photograph. In this scene, I was really moved by the forlorn expression of the person in the wheelchair hugging their cuddly toy tight while the rest of the family is on their phone. This kind of image is really what I'm trying to find out on the street. Something subtle but tells a bit of a story. Emotion is so powerful, so capturing emotions on the street can then make for really strong images in my opinion. Funny hat, not really a story-driven photo, but a bit of fun. I'm always looking for things unusual or out of the ordinary, anything that might make you chuckle a bit. I think capturing humour is the holy grail of good street photography, but it's also extremely hard to do. I recently wrote an article about this on my new blog, so feel free to check that out if you enjoy all things street photography in the written form. Link in the description below. Composition can be really tricky to do well when you're looking for spur-of-the-moment stories on the street, as they often happen so fast you just react and snap off the shutter. I really think it's worth practicing compositional techniques a lot though when you can, because then it becomes more instinctual over time, so you can make a good composition in the spur of the moment. Having said that, I've noticed I've kind of fallen into the habit of putting a subject dead centre in most of my frames recently, so I'll definitely be actively trying to compose my moment-driven photos a bit better going forward. At this point, the Chinese New Year festivities had started, and I was keen to photograph a bit of the action. Events can be really great places to practice capturing stories, and the best way to do that is photograph the fringes of the event, the little intimate moments that happen outside of the main parade, for example. I really like this shot because it looks a bit like the lion snuck up on the woman in a mask. Sort of pantomime-esque where everyone's sort of saying, you know, it's behind you, so yeah, I quite like that one. Another thing that can be great to look out for an easy story or to practice is protests. Here there's this interesting protest against factory farming animals, and I think it's quite a powerful scene, a bit out of the norm, and then protests are there to be photographed, so you don't need to feel anxious about photographing strangers. So yeah, a really good opportunity to practice and maybe capture a shot with a bit of subtext and story there. Gestures and expressions are such a big trigger for me on the street. I just missed filming it on the GoPro as I only noticed the shot in a split second, but I love the light, scene and expression of this woman biting her finger. It gave me an emotional reaction when I saw it, and if that happened to me then it's likely it might give an emotional reaction to a viewer as well. On the way back to the station towards the end of the day, I found myself completely by accident right in front of a lion dance. I managed to fire off a couple of shots, nothing particularly special, but fun to capture nonetheless. Then it was back to the hotel to recharge and get ready for the full Chinese New Year celebrations happening the next day, which is where we are now. The sun had come out a bit, which is always nice. Good light can be really powerful as a storytelling tool, and after months of grey days, it was very welcome. I walked along the side of the procession, again focusing on capturing the fringes of the event, as I find this makes for more interesting photos than the event itself. I was just looking out for nice little moments that tell some kind of story, at least to me. There's probably nothing more quite as synonymous with China, Chinese New Year and Chinatown in London than red lanterns. So I was immediately attracted to these lanterns outside Leicester Square. Also the light was great, which was a bonus. It can be really easy to see something interesting, photograph it and then move on. But for me, it always pays to wait until something happens, like a little gesture, expression or moment. It can be all too easy to photograph an interesting scene at face value, but in my opinion it's always worth thinking to yourself, is there something there that can make for a better image? And if there is, be patient and try and capture it. So spending a bit of time here, I noticed a lot of people interacting with the red lanterns, and I thought it would make for a better photo front on. So I went down to try and capture a moment or a gesture, and I'm really happy with these images. Back in town, and I noticed these line dancers trying to walk through the crowd. They weren't performing, which was much more interesting to me, so I wanted to see how I could incorporate people talking to them, asking for photos, and try and make more of a layered image. Again, rather than trying to photograph the procession, which everyone else was doing, I wanted to try and find a little story on the edge of the main event. Initially here I was triggered by this guy smoking his vape while carrying the dragon, which I thought was quite funny. The photo didn't quite work too well, but I hung around for a bit as like a sense of good photo to be had. The dragon head fell over, and I really liked the moment this lady picked it up. Much more powerful than a photo of the dance itself, in my opinion. You can never go wrong with a photograph of lovers. That's always emotive and makes a nice story. Here I noticed the bunny in the bag first, but when they went to kiss, I think it made for a really strong story-driven scene. Another thing to experiment with when trying to capture stories is settings. So I tried a slower shutter speed here to capture the movement of these people dancing, in contrast to the guy on his phone who seemingly wasn't interested at all. If I was paying a bit more attention, I think I could have gotten a better photo here, but it's still quite a fun little image for me. This man put a hat on his dog and took a photo for some reason, but what makes it interesting for me is that the street is empty of cars, it's full of people. You don't often see a dog in a yellow hat, so it was a bit of fun. Another perk of photographing events, you see some pretty weird stuff. You can also find a story in a still life image too. Not the best example of it, but I still like this heart balloon falling down by itself. It made me kind of think, well, someone's lost their heart. You know, it's got a nice story-driven feeling to it. Back in Chinatown, and initially I noticed this temporary graffiti Year of the Dragon sign, but then also saw this mum and a kid pointing and playing with a paper dragon. A couple of nice story images to end the day. And finally, I noticed this woman looking and feeling a bit like I was after a full day of street shooting, and I thought it made for a fun little photo to finish off my trip to London with. I appreciate a lot of us can't always get to photograph in a big city, so check out this video next for ideas of what to photograph in a small or boring place. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.